Hello and welcome to Module 10. I always feel like this is like my Sunday night armchair series where I look so put together for you all. I hope you enjoy the dinosaurs. As you can see, I asked my kids' opinion and they thought dinosaurs seemed like a great idea for Module 10. All right, so as far as announcements go, I don't have a ton this week. I do want to tell you, it says article of the week, thoughts and notes. That's not a bad thing. I think whenever you see like, my professor has something to say about article of the week, boo. It's a good thing. I've really appreciated how thoughtful all of your responses to each other are. And for the people, Brittany R. is one of them who always finds the time to go back and respond to other people. That's great. If it's your article of the week and you want to respond to some of the things that people have mentioned or said to you about yours, you feel free. I think that that is a great way for y'all to connect over things. And then I wanted to know, well, I guess I don't really want to, I want to know, but it's not like you can all raise your hand and give me feedback, although that would be ideal. If you do want more resources for the teaching of writing, one thing that I think this not synchronous, the asynchronicity, I don't even know what it would be called. But because we're asynchronous, one thing we miss out on is I can't just bring copies of my books for you all to like pass around and look at as you're coming into the room or at the beginning of the class period or whatever, and jot down titles or things that you might want to get, because we're just not together. Even this many weeks into it, I still find things that I'm so frustrated by having to teach it to a screen like this without even little faces in my screen. It's just me and my screen. So I do want to create a resources guide for you all that you could print from e-learning and keep, or copy what you want and keep. So be on the lookout for that. I have not gotten there yet. I just had the end of a marking period for my 8th graders. And then this coming week, I'm supposed to figure out how to do conferences virtually. On my own. They're not giving us any parameters other than it can be phone, email, or Zoom, whatever the parent prefers. And we're getting no time off school to do that. So I will be doing that this week along with grading your literacy narratives this week. So look for those grades. So fun. But I do want to prepare a resource list outside of what we've done as far as reading in this class that I think could be helpful, especially on some of the different curriculums that you have heard mentioned by some of the interviewers. I think it would be helpful for you to know about those. All right, so this week, look at how short it is. 5 things this week, and really only 4 if you're not Laura or Taylor. Yay! So everyone's going to respond to the articles of the week, number 17 and 18. Winter and Jake posted those for us, so those are ready to go. Taylor and Laura have the extra responsibility this week of finding us 19 and 20, which means after that, there's only 3 of you left to do articles of the week. So that's very exciting. And then I will do the last 2 articles of the week to get us to 25, which is what my math is based on as far as why you're getting 6 points per response. Yeah. And then you will watch and respond to Julie Tessier's interview. She is our last official guest. I am the guest speaker next week. And I'm not really a guest. So this is our last not me video that you'll watch. I recommend bringing tissues. I went a little over my 30-minute goal that I usually have to respect everybody's time. But Julie, I could have talked to her for even longer. And I think once you watch her interview, you will see why it could have gone on for a long time. And as people have mentioned in their responses, that I too find this to be a great resource for all of you as a part of this class. But I also wish that we could be doing this in person so that you would have the opportunity to be able to ask follow-up questions and to really dig into the areas of the interview that that are most important to all of you. But I know that you're really going to love Julie. This week also look out for, you'll be receiving a copy of one of your peers, their philosophy of teaching. It will be anonymous, and I'm going to go over that a little bit later towards the end of the lecture. And I'm going to talk about your lesson design, which is part 2 of the final. So your philosophy of teaching is part 1 of your final that's due on December 16. And the lesson design is part 2. That way you can be maybe working in a little time here and there in each week to kind of be working on these things so that it doesn't come up and sneak up on you at the end. So here we go. Teaching students to plan. So this module is both about teaching students to plan, but then I'm also going to talk a little bit about planning for you as the teacher, because you are going to be the one designing a lesson plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about student planning for writing and teacher planning for learning in this module. So teaching students to plan. The evidence-based research shows that using self-regulated strategy development, or SRSD, is the best way to teach students how to plan and carry out a writing task. I will be honest and say I did not know this had a name. I did not know it was called SRSD, but I absolutely have always used these steps in my own teaching for the last decade or more. For sure, since I've done Third Coast Writing Project through Western in the summer, I've been using these. So I just didn't know it had a name, but it does. Look at that. So what it means is that you teach students strategies, but you're also including the ability for students to evaluate their own thought processes and responses, so that it is so you're teaching strategies for writing, but you're also teaching them to use their metacognition. They're like, how did I come up with this? What do I think about this? What kind of it shifts that locus of control from the teacher to the student, which is what all administrators want to see us do. They want our students, but that's best learning too, right? Like that's the best when students are in control and are owning their own learning processes. That's when the best learning happens. And like I said, it's evidence-based. And I did post in e-learning a scan of the page from my writing best practices in writing book that shows some mnemonic devices for certain genre-based writing. So I don't know. I know some of you probably used these when you were in at least high school. I know that draft is on there, DRAFT, and raft. You may have used raft. You may have also used, off the top of my head, I can't think. In fact, I'm going to show you. Let's see if we can look here. It's right here. Of course, it's going to be sideways because that's how my scanner works. But you can print it and see it. Oh, yeah. Remember raft, listing the role, the audience, the format, and the topic. Or I know a lot of you, I used that for a long time teaching high school. And then there are a few of these other ones. I never used list, but I know of people who used stop. suspend judgment, take a side, organize ideas, plan more, for teaching opinion writing, and so on and so forth. So these are all different ways that you can teach students to plan. So there are 6 recursive steps to teaching, to getting kids started to do the planning process. And I absolutely use all of these. I don't know, I guess I do use them in this order too. So the first one is develop background knowledge, then you discuss it, then you model it, and then they memorize it. Actually, memorizing happens kind of all through here. And then you as a teacher support it, and then the students move to independent performance. So let's look at these steps. The first 3, develop background knowledge. That's when you're doing some direct instruction on vocabulary and what kind of content is required to complete the writing task. Often that will look like direct instruction, at least for part of it. Some of it can be inquiry based, and students can have a hand in doing that and teaching it to each other and learning. But that is often where direct instruction, if it's going to take place, that's where it takes place. And then you have the discuss it part where you're moving it right over to the student. So even if you've had some direct instruction in your vocabulary or in teaching parts of the content, the discussing it part puts it right back to the students. This is where you discuss the vocabulary, you discuss the purpose of the genre that they're going to be writing in. You talk about the different parts of the genre. If you're having them write short stories or narratives, you talk about, and depending on their age, the upper elementary intermediate grades will start talking about that story pyramid, right? The rising action to the climax, and then the falling action and the resolution, the inciting incident, all of those things. So that's where you would discuss those things and talk about where those things are and that they have names. And then that's where you will give them examples and have them pick it apart and say, so what would the rising action be here? What would what would the climax be of the story, and so on and so forth. Then you model it. This is where you're showing them. Your discuss it is also where your mentor texts are going to come in the discuss it, because you're showing the students examples and having them pick them apart and talk about them. The model it part is where you get on your document camera or on your big chart paper, depending on age and, activity. And this is where you're going to start modeling what you want the students to do. What is the writing strategy? What is the genre? And you're going to ask for their input so that it's not just direct instruction again, so that they have input about each of the parts. You're also going to model the self-regulatory strategies, like getting started, problem definition, goal setting, self-evaluation. So this is where you start to think, I've used the word then a lot. I wonder if there are other words I could use besides then. And then you ask the students to help you. So that way they can see you finding the issues, or man, I just really don't know how to start. Who knows how I could start this? Helps get the kids involved, and it models that's all part of the writing process. The next 3 steps starts with step 4, memorize it. Again, this usually starts from way in the beginning. When you're teaching, students begin to internalize all of the vocabulary, the important parts. So it's listed as step 4, but really step 4 happens during all of the first 3 steps. 5 is support it. Once you've done some examples together where you've been modeling it, this is the we do part of, I do, we do, you do. This is the we do part. We've done all these things. Now you're going to provide the students with some scaffolding, some support systems for getting started themselves. So this might look like sentence starters. I use sentence starters a lot with 8th graders, especially when it's something new. I will often take those away, or I give them a list of general sentence starters for each of the kinds of writing that we do. And they can look back at those if they need them. But the idea is that they will move away from needing the scaffolding. Obviously, scaffolding isn't meant to stay up next to a building. It's meant to come down once the building can stand on its own. So, but you provide those, especially when it's the first time doing something. Sentence starters, visual aids, if you have some sort of like flow chart, or pictures that they are writing to, a pre-created format. I'm thinking of like elementary school, if you have the 2 lines underneath, that gives them an idea of how much to write, and then areas where the illustration would go gives them an idea for length and what it will look like, what they need to do on the page. And then independent performance is when you set them free to begin work. And that doesn't just mean, of course, that doesn't just mean, okay, everybody get started. I'm going to be over here at my desk eating an apple. That means that they get started, but you're still there to support as they're writing. So that is how you get kids, how you teach kids to plan and get started. That is something that you'll probably need now, because we're going to talk about creating a lesson design that you will be doing. So before I go through here, I kind of want to look at the sheet. So I'm going to go back to the module that you can all see now, but right now, as I'm doing it, you can't see it. Okay, so here's the lesson design assignment. So the rationale, why do we do this? All of the sections of 3690 do this as the final. And we do it because it helps you. The more lessons that you create and the more input you get on those lessons, the better prepared you will be to create lessons for actual real students someday. These lessons also can serve to possibly be used in your student assisting or student teaching placements if you have, and they can be adjusted for that if you find that you are asked to teach something similar to what you've already planned. And they can also be used in a teaching portfolio to show. I know I always interview my student teachers before I actually officially sign on and say, yes, I would like this person. And I know I like to see what they know how to do, because all universities are different. And I've had student teachers from Grand Valley. I've had student teachers from Calvin College. I've had a student teacher from Aquinas. So, and all of them come to me with different levels of knowing what to do as far as planning. And so I like to see, I tell them when they come to meet with me to bring with them lessons that they've created in their classes like this. So knowing that a prospective employer or even just a prospective student teacher mentor, and I've said no to student teachers just based on talking with them and seeing what they didn't know. So because it needs to work, you need to be able to work well together. So this can show them how prepared and organized you are as far as that too. So the task is going to be to create a week-long writing lesson. So a minimum of 60 of a 60-minute block per day for 5 days. Okay, so and it needs to be around students learning to write a specific genre of your choice. So you get to pick. Are you teaching them narrative, informational, or opinion? And you need to use the 6+1 traits of writing that you're teaching them, something from the 6+ traits of writing for that genre. You get to pick the grade level and the discipline. So, for instance, you could decide that you're going to teach a third grade social studies unit Actually, I know I wrote third grade social studies, but I'm going to say fourth grade here, and you'll see why. Because I know the fourth grade social studies curriculum better than I know third grade social studies curriculum. So let's just go with fourth grade as our example. So let's say you want to do fourth grade social studies, and you're going to be looking, and in social studies, you're doing Michigan history, because Michigan history is part of the third grade curriculum. And you're going to have the students writing narratives from the point of view of historical people from Michigan. And so your choice is narrative. You have third graders, social studies. The last thing that you would have to pick is what trait of writing or traits of writing am I going to focus on? Am I focusing on voice? Am I focusing on content? What are my ideas? What am I focusing on in my 5 days of lesson planning? So those are your choices. What you're going to create is you're going to have a cover sheet and you're going to have your lesson plans. That's what you'll be submitting. Here are the requirements. I know you all can read these, but I want to give commentary in case you need it since we're not together. So the cover sheet is going to have the title of your lesson. Be creative. It'll be so fun. Include your grade and discipline that you're teaching. It's going to have kind of an overview of the 5-day unit lesson and why you chose that. And you're going to describe how does this fit into a larger picture. So if we're going with the fourth grade social studies thing, have they already learned about X, Y, and you're going to be teaching Z? Or maybe they've learned X, you're going to teach Y, and after that, they'll learn Z. So kind of place this into these 5 days into something that would be larger. And then what standards from the Common Core state standards, that should not say WebSit, that should say website, I am sorry, fit for your grade level. So you're going to go to the Common Core state standards website. You're going to go to you're going to hit writing, and you're going to choose what grade level, and you're going to look at those. And if you're choosing narrative, you're going to look at the narrative standards and say, okay, what standards will I be covering based on these 6 traits that I want to, not all 6 traits, but of the 6+1 traits, which standards will I be teaching? So that will be all in your cover sheet. That'll kind of give me, okay, where are we going with this? Then each of your 5 days needs a daily lesson sheet. And on your daily lesson sheet, you should have a daily measurable objective that the students will, be able to do that you're teaching. A learning target that's written in student-friendly language. That's usually an I can, like for instance, my students tomorrow, while I'm not there because my kid has an appointment, my sub-plan learning target says I can write effective summaries. That's their learning target for the day. The learning outcomes, we call this success criteria where I teach. Those will show, that's how the students will know. So that's usually I will language. So learning target, I can write effective summaries. Their success criteria tomorrow is I will write a summary of what I read in my choice book, and I will write a summary of chapter 7 in The Giver. That's what they're going to be doing while I'm gone tomorrow. If it was your 4th grade social studies class, I can do whatever it is that you want them to do that day. I will, what are they going to produce? Then you're going to want to make sure you list the materials that both the students and the teacher are going to need for that day, for that lesson, for that 60-minute block. You'll want your detailed agenda for that 60-minute time period. What is that 60-minute time period going to look like? You have an anticipatory set, getting the kids ready to learn. You'll have your guided practice and or direct instruction, the I do part, where you're, maybe that's the mentor text part. You'll have your guided practice, where you're picking things apart as well, and maybe writing a sample together. And then you'll have your independent practice, where what will students be doing during that time? You'll want to list any modifications. What will you have ready to go if needed? I always think of these as possible mini lessons or alternatives if something's not working. So if I have, for instance, if one of the things the students are going to do that day are write an opening sentence, one of my modifications might be, I will be the scribe for students who need to verbalize or who have, who need that kind of modification. Or I will reteach capitalization or end punctuation, just in case you get there and the students haven't remembered. Because those are the kinds of things we find out as we're modeling and working with the students to write something. If all of a sudden we realize, oh my gosh, they have forgotten completely about capitalizing the first letter of the sentence, then you need to be able to modify your lesson to stick that in there, because you don't want to go through your entire lesson and go, guess they just won't have those, because that's not good. Accommodations, what are you going to do for any students who have special needs? That's another one where you might handwrite for the student, or you might allow them to use talk to text, or you might allow them to type it instead of handwriting it, or a number of things. Assessments, how are you going to know that they got it? I mean, their success criteria might be, I will have 3 things that my person in history did in their life, but how are you going to assess that? Are you going to walk around and say, yep, everybody has 3 things? Will you be collecting that? Will you be grading it, or will it just be a check? So formative versus summative. Usually summative doesn't happen until the end because that's showing mastery of something. Informative is as we go. So you're going to want to, but you're going to want to check in. You don't want to just start teaching, especially at the younger grades. You don't want to start teaching something at the beginning of the week, not check any of their work, and then you get to Friday and only 3 people got it. But you would have known that if you had been checking. So how are you going to check? In all that, you must focus on one genre of writing. So it has to focus either on narrative, informal, or informational, or opinion. You have to use at least one mentor text in your lesson. You may use more than one, but you have to use at least one. You must teach and assess at least one of the 6+1 writing traits. You may use more, and you may formatively assess whichever traits you want, or you can, maybe in your cover letter you say, okay, we've already done ideas, blah, blah, blah. This is how I would have them do, conventions or whatever you want to pick. But you have to have some sort of focus on at least one of those so that I can see how you would assess that. And then you do not have to go through the entire writing process in those 5 days. So you do not have to start from nothing and have a perfect paper at the end of those 5 days. That would be an insane ask from me. No teacher does that. So you can set up your 5 days of lesson anywhere in the writing process you want. You can tell me, okay, we're going to assume the students have already have a rough draft, or they already have an outline, or they already have whatever, and then go from there. Or maybe you want to start from the beginning and teach the first 5 days of how you would begin an opinion piece about pets, about what pet I should have, or convincing their parents that they should have a pet. So, use your 5 days can fall anywhere within a larger picture, is what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be one unit in 5 days, because I don't know any teacher who does an entire unit in 5 days, except for this, right? Like, we're doing one module a week, and it doesn't feel like enough time to me, but whatever. I don't feel like we're giving each of the topics we could enough focus, but I think that's the asynchronous online thing. So your audience is going to be teachers or administrators. so that they can gain a perspective of your ability to plan. The final due date for this is December 16 before midnight. And it's 200 of the 300 points. Your final is worth 300 points. Your philosophy of teaching is 100 of those points. This is the other 200. So this is kind of your overview. On here, I just give you kind of some pointers. You want to choose a lesson plan template. You do not have to use any particular one. So I think I've said I put the one that we have to use at my junior high. I put the copy of that template in e-learning. But you absolutely do not have to use that one. If you have one you like from a previous ed class that you learned from, that you feel comfortable with, use that. If you prefer to set up your own sheet, like using a table or not a table or whatever, column, whatever you want. I want it to be something that you feel comfortable using, but that is readable to other people. I also encourage backward design. Again, I don't know and I can't talk to you in person, so I don't know what your other ed classes have taught you about lesson design. But what works best for me and every ELA teacher I know, I guess I can't speak for other disciplines, but we always use the backward plan design where we say, okay, what do we want students to be able to do by the end of this marking period? What are our goals? So for instance, the marking period that I'm currently in with my students, I want them to be able to write a polished informational writing piece. We're reading The Giver. That's our anchor text for the semester or for the marking period. So I want them to be able to do a summary of a chapter. I want them to be able to talk about the type of language, specifically precision of language, that Lois Lowry uses for her characters in The Giver. I want them to be able to craft a theme, and I want them to be able to make connections between the dystopia of The Giver and the dystopia of our real lives. So I start with that in mind, and I work, this I guess is backwards for you guys, backwards from that. So I say, okay, well, if that's what we want to end with, where do we need to start? And then what are the steps to get there? So start with your end goal in mind first. First decide, what do I want these students to do at the end of this 5-day lesson? Okay, how do I get there? That will also prevent you from trying to take on something too big or choosing something too little, because you don't want to say, okay, I want my students to be able to write a complete sentence by the end of this 5 days. Because if you're taking 5 hours to have students write a complete sentence and you're doing 4th grade, that's a problem. So, you want to pick something that you can do in that time frame. Consider also what students and teachers are doing at each step. So when you start that agenda and you say something like, the teacher will do this, well, what are the students doing? Are they sitting and listening? Are they taking notes? Are they, what are they doing? Are they following along on something? Or if you say the students will then, turn and talk, and by the way, you can make this a non-COVID lesson. I think I should say that you do not have to make this COVID-y. You can make this just in a traditional classroom that does not have COVID restrictions. I want you guys to be able to use your imaginations to the best of their abilities and not have the restrictions that we currently have. But you are also allowed. So that's something that you would put in your cover letter. Is this during COVID or is this during non-pandemic world? But what are the teachers and students doing at during time? So if you're describing what the students are doing, also think about what the teacher is doing. Are you walking around? Are you, doing small group things? What's happening? Don't forget about transition time. Even with 8th grade, I know that if we're going from me modeling something and we're all as a class, getting them then to get started on their own is going to take a few minutes. It's going to take time for them to settle into what they're doing because they always have to talk to their neighbor first. So keep that in mind when you're planning. And then make sure you think about the time you expect each part of your lesson to take. You don't want to give a ridiculous amount of time for something that will take 30 seconds or less. So keep that in mind kind of too. All right. So that's something that's not due for a while. But if I were you, I would start really thinking about the nuts and bolts of that and thinking about what you want as what the thing that you're going to teach, and maybe just start in your notebooks, start writing down, the answers to some of those questions so that you can start brainstorming them. The thing that's due a little bit sooner than that is going to be giving feedback on somebody else's teaching philosophy. So this week I'm going to send you an email, and with that email will be an anonymous peer's rough draft attached as a Word document. Feedback will also be anonymous. So when I take that and send it back to them, I will leave your name off of it. So it'll be completely anonymous. You're going to submit your completed feedback by November 22. So you have 2 weeks to get this done. However, I put this note on here. Keep in mind that next week I'm going to be talking about assessment, and I'm going to give you all a piece of student writing for you to assess by the end of that week. So you're going to have that coming at you next week. So you don't want to have to do all of this at once. So you might want to maybe do it when you get it, is what I'm saying, so that you don't procrastinate it all until the end, because you want to give thoughtful feedback. And I'll go ahead and we'll look at that assignment sheet also, which is also in module 10, instructions for peer review. It's right here. So you can do it one of two ways. I'm going to give you the Word document, and you can use that little, if you go to the top of the Word document, it says review. If you click on that, it shows you that you can do comments and add new comments in. So you can do it that way, and then you just save it that way with all the comments, and you put it in the Dropbox. Or if that doesn't work for whatever reason, if you don't have Word, or if for whatever reason they've given me a PDF and so I can't give you a Word document because I didn't tell you that it had to be in a Word document. So if that doesn't work for you, or if you just don't like it, you may create a whole new document just for your feedback. Just make sure that when you're giving feedback, you reference, like in paragraph 1, you said this way, or this sentence, and then type it out maybe, was a little awkward for me. Could you possibly rephrase it? So make sure that they know what you're talking about in their paper. Hopefully that makes sense. So what you can provide feedback on. First of all, these are the requirements, so you can always provide feedback on this. Is it a 1 to 2 page single-spaced document? Did they do that part right? Yes or no? If they didn't, you might want to suggest, hey, this isn't formatted correctly. And then does it answer these kind of questions? Did you feel like they knew, or that they talked about these 6 things in it? If you didn't, then you can say, hey, you didn't really talk too much about the methods that you use to teach. Maybe you want to, strengthen that a little bit. Or you talked a lot about the goals for that you have for your student, but you didn't really talk about like how you would get to those goals. So, you might want to, give feedback in those areas. Also, make sure that it all makes sense. If there's a sentence or something that doesn't make sense, or a paragraph that doesn't make sense, feel free to say, this doesn't make sense. Maybe you want to think about rewording it. Are there suggestions you have to bolster any of the text? Maybe they said something and you're like, ooh, this was really good. keep going with that idea. Tell me more. Or was there anything that you went, that you probably don't need to talk about this in here? Or any other suggestions you have for the writer? And then, of course, if they have any glaring mechanic or usage issues, please let them know. I'm sure they would love to correct those before they give it to me, since I will mark them down if they're there. So this is your chance to help each other have a better paper. Keep in mind, everyone's giving you their rough first draft. Everybody's rough first draft is in some ways bad. So keep that in mind, and you don't have to tell them this is bad, because that's rude. But you could say, I can tell this is your rough draft. Here are some suggestions. Much nicer. And then be sure to write an end comment that sums up what you feel like the writer did well and what their strengths are so far. And, the areas that you feel need some strengthening or need some work done. And then, so you'll be receiving it this week, and it won't be due to the Dropbox until November 22. And your comments to a peer are worth 25 points. So that is what we're doing for that. And so then here are your homework assignment reminders for this week. Articles of the week, do that. Watch and respond to Julie. You might need tissues. And then I would get your feedback to appear done as soon as I can get it emailed out to you, which for anyone who has it turned in, you should be receiving somebody's Monday. Is it Monday? Are you watching this on Monday? If you're watching this on Monday, today. And then with any other time that you have left, since you don't have to ask questions for anybody or do a reading response of any kind, although I guess feedback is kind of like a reading response, I would set aside some time to start the idea pumping, the drafting for that lesson design. So that is what is going on this week. And if you have questions, please make sure to shoot me an email. I've been pretty good about getting back in a timely manner this time. Feeling good about myself. So have a wonderful week.